Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I just can't let go. I've still got some fall tasks to do. I'm going to give the lawn its final mowing yet. Ours isn't totally dormant, brown and dormant yet, so I'm going to give it its final mowing down to 2 inches, probably over the weekend, because I think it's going to get really cold after that. And I've still got some mulch to lay down and some things like that, perennials to cut back yet. How are you doing on your fall chores?
Don, I am right behind you there. I'm behind you in my yard work tasks. In fact, the last couple mornings I've been moving my pots that were closer to the house out into the yard so they could get some sun, so all the dirt could loosen up in there, and I can clean out my pots so that they won't crack and freeze. Yeah, I'm doing cleanup and yard cleanup too, and yeah, I plan on, here we are. It's the 13th of November as we're recording this. The next 2 days are supposed to be 50s and maybe even 60.
I'm going to take advantage.
This is a great time to take advantage. I'm going to go up and clean up the gutters too when it's this nice, and yeah, just try to get out and get a kind of. Hopefully, my neighbor will say, you've been saying that for a while, but hopefully this is the weekend I'm getting it all done.
And, of course, one of the tasks that I need to do is protect some of my material from rabbits. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that today, protecting our yards and gardens and perennials and shrubs and trees from rabbits and deer and voles. So that's one project that I need to do. I need to put some fencing and different protection around things this fall yet. So that's on my to-do list for this weekend. And
it should be, it's just that still, maybe this is the last nice weekend where we can really enjoy being outside and getting down on our hands and knees and doing yard work and actually being able to put our hands in dirt again for this may be the last time for months and months and months doing it outside.
And getting a few extra days to do these tasks, it's a treat, isn't it? Because I've done some of these things when it's not so nice, but that they've got to get done and the time is closing in on you. So yeah, if we got a couple of nice days to accomplish some things, so much the better.
Well, you've got kind of a seasonal question that a reader sent in.
Yes, and thanks for everyone who does email us. Thanks. And so yesterday I got an interesting email. Okay, and here it is. I appreciate your podcast. Listen to it regularly. Thanks for that. Many years ago, I regularly listened to a gardening program in Twin Cities. I think it was Fred Glasgow. He talked about planting amaryllis in the spring and drying and overwintering them. Friends have given me a few, but they're very prolific multipliers. I dug over 80 bulbs this fall. The blooms are popular in the neighborhood, and I've received many compliments on them. So thanks for sending that email. They didn't include their first name, so I can't address you. But thanks for sending in the email and the photos. So now, what immediately caught my ear and my eye in the photos that were sent along here is, I thought, well, okay, amaryllis, most of us are familiar with those big bulbs sold before Christmas time. Mm-hmm. And they're quite easy to grow. You pot them up, follow the directions, pot them up, and they're usually blooming by Christmas time with the big trumpet-shaped blossoms. Mm-hmm. Some are red, some are pink, some are,
big,
various
sturdy
colors.
Stalk.
Yes, big. And it's amazing that can come from this big bulb. So we frequently see those kind of around Christmas time. So what is so intriguing here is these amaryllis bulbs are planted out here by the writer, planted out in spring, and here's a photo of them in a flower bed. The grass is nice and green in front, and there are all these amaryllis, kind of a pinkish white, beautiful bloom, all these amaryllis in full bloom during the summertime.
When you first showed me that picture, I thought, oh, those are nice lilies. And it took me a minute to register that they are not lilies.
Yeah, they're amaryllis. So that is awesome. As we always say, count the day lost, you don't learn something new. And I don't think I have ever seen amaryllis bulbs used in outdoor summertime flower beds the way that these are. Well, that's amazing. They're beautiful.
I tried. So when we'll have amaryllis for the holidays. We'll have them in the house for the holidays, and then after they die back, after their cycle is kind of done, I'll cut off the tops and put them, kind of get them dormant. But then I'll plant them. I will plant them outside just so that they're outside once the summer is nice, and then because then they get their regular moisture, their regular go. So you will
build up the energy within that bulb during the summertime.
Yeah. Or I've done it sometimes where there's still been leaves on them, and so that build up that leaves, and then you pull them out. Usually, the end of September or the end of August.
Let them go dormant, probably.
Yeah, for a couple of months.
Then you pot them up, start watering. And then they bloom again.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's interesting. Amaryllis is a tropical bulb, like you mentioned, John. And amaryllis is interesting in that it doesn't necessarily have to go dormant. It will bloom whenever the bulb forms enough energy to produce a flower bud, which then, of course, emerges and you get the big, beautiful flower stalk and the flower. And so amaryllis, there are many ways to grow it and handle it. Like you do, John. You plant it outside in the summertime, let it energize, good light, produces leaves, then let it go dormant, and then bring it out of the dormancy, and that triggers some blossom. But as our writer indicates here, their method of doing this is to, in the fall here, there's another photo of the bulbs that were dug up, and the leaves are still on them, but as they indicate, they will let those dry down, store them over winter, and then plant them out in their flower bed next spring. And there you have it, the photo of the flower bed of all these amaryllis. And I can appreciate that, as the writer indicates, that the neighbors enjoy the view. Those are absolutely beautiful. So another way of growing amaryllis. Now, the writer also indicates that they are very prolific in multiplying. And of course, that picture says it right there, because those, they've gotten a lot of multiples out of these amaryllis. And if you've ever grown an amaryllis, even in a pot, if you take it out of that pot, after it's done blooming, you'll find a lot of little bulblets around the main one. And so they do send out quite a few little bulbs from which you can propagate those. So again, thank you, writer. Thanks for sending this in. You've given us another option for amaryllis. I think it'd be kind of fun to, instead of just having it always as a holiday, to plant these out in the spring and let them bloom.
Do you think that it would have a longer bloom in the summer? Do you think that would the bloom time be any different in that? Would you have a longer bloom out in the summer with regular watering? You're probably getting more sunlight than it would in the house.
I think it would.
Okay.
Yes, and it'd be interesting when I respond back again to the writer. I'm going to ask, how long do they typically bloom for you? What is the blooming season of those? So absolutely beautiful. So again, thank you. And if anyone else would like to share their success stories with me, maybe something novel that you're doing or questions, send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
That was a fun one.
That's awesome.
That was great to hear from that.
Yeah, and it's always fun to talk about amaryllis because there's so many different ways of growing, and they are impactful. Those big trumpet-shaped blossoms are just huge.
Well, and then also they're like for when I plant mine outside in kind of the off season, as so to speak, just the leaves. They're a nice green, long, strapping leaf, so it does add some. There's an aspect there. It may not get the color of the full flower of the flower, but the leaves are kind of a nice touch too.
Exactly. And before we leave the topic, sometimes people wonder, well, they follow this, so they'll get leaves but no bloom. A key to the bloom and getting a bloom that big is good nutrition.
Okay.
And so I'm sure the writer is probably fertilizing these as well, because good nutrition then will allow these bulbs, no matter how you grow them, to form a good flower bud inside that bulb that will produce that big. So nutrition is key, a regular fertilizing, a key to amaryllis bloom.
All right. Well, let's talk about. So we've got these wonderful year-round holiday things there. Some of the things in our yard, though, we really need to protect. And we need to protect from critters and kind of the unwanted guests that we may have in our yard. So,
yes, let's go from something really nice and uplifting to something.
The work that comes that's necessary to keep your garden so nice and nice and uplifting.
So critters that want to attack our hard fought for plants.
Well, they're just doing what they do, but yeah.
Well, I guess you can't fault some of these creatures for just wanting to feed. You know, I guess if I was in their place, I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
So maybe we can protect our plants, and maybe they'll find something else to nibble on.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm sure there are. In fact, I know there are people. I can't think of any examples right now, but people who set up an area to attract the critters so that they stay over here, where they away from their flowering gardens or away from their vegetables and things like that.
That's a good point, John. And I don't bring this up as we're going to talk about voles and deer and rabbit. I don't mention that in there, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because I found that in our lawn, which has some clover in it. I like the little white Dutch clover. I found that clover will be, that's preferred by rabbits over even our lettuce in the garden.
Okay.
And we do have our garden fence, but rabbits are sneaky enough. If they wanted to get in, they could probably get in through the fence. But I have found that during the summertime, the rabbits will be just lazily munching on our clover. And that's a good spot for them.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy that. So I like your idea that maybe giving some alternate food sources, and of course, clover plays well with lawn grass. And so, yeah, I found, have you ever watched the Bambi movie? Thumper is eating the clover, just the blossom, and his mother tells Thumper, okay, eat your greens too. I always think of that when I see the little rabbits loving those white blossoms on the clover.
Well, so let's talk about some of these critters. Let's go from smallest to biggest. Let's start with the voles.
Yes. Okay. Now, anytime I kind of talk about voles, I discuss it as being a creature that probably attacks the most different types of things in our yard and garden and landscape. Because, okay, when we think of creatures that attack things, okay, rabbits do browsing on, twigs and different things. Deer also, they do browsing on things. Okay, but generally deer and rabbits do not damage your lawn. Voles do. Beets and potatoes. Rabbits generally don't eat the tubers of those, and deer either. Maybe they'll go after beets, but they don't try to tunnel into your potato. Voles do. Well, first of all, we should mention, okay, what exactly is a vole? Voles are field mice. They're the brownish, kind of blackish, brownish, tannish field mice. They have a very short tail. So the gray house mouse that has a very long tail is quite different from these. Voles are fairly slow moving. When you discover them in the lawn or other areas, they're relatively slow moving, much slower than a regular long-tailed mouse. So those are the creatures that we're talking about. And one thing that makes voles so interesting and so damaging is they reproduce so vigorously and frequently. One female vole, I think, can produce offspring of about 4,000 in the course of a year or two. And a female vole can start reproducing after only 3 months of age. They go in population cycles. I think I've heard 4 to 7 years. So I've noticed too in our own yard that every so often the voles will be worse. And so that's the little creature that we're talking about. Now, the damage that they do in lawns, in the fall, you think all is well with your lawn. You mow it down to its appropriate height, and winter sets in and the snow covers everything nice. Then when the snow disappears, you find this meandering channel system of channels kind of right on the surface. I've got a picture there, John. And right on the surface, they very visibly cause all these little kind kind of channels or tunnels. And what they're doing is they're nibbling off the grass. They're living on that grass. Sometimes they gather a group of it together, nesting. And in most cases, they don't eat far enough down into the crown to totally kill the grass. So usually the grass comes back. But if a lawn has been attacked by voles, they loosen a lot of fluff, and you've got a bunch of dead stuff to rake off. And if they nibble far enough down into the crown, it can kill the grass, at least in the tracks that they make under the snow. And so voles can be very damaging in lawns. Also, fruit trees. They love fruit trees, so under the cover of the snow, voles will work right above soil line, and they'll totally strip off the bark on many types of trees. I've had them attack poplars and, of course, fruit trees, also shrubs. So the voles do not work higher up on the tree, but just in the area where they can reach themselves. And so we got damage under the snow in the wintertime. And then I have really noticed a lot of damage over the years on voles in the vegetable garden. Beets, they will eat the shoulders off of the beets. The top is still growing, but the shoulders of the beets will be eaten down in, and so causing quite a bit of damage on those. And potatoes, when you go to dig the potatoes, you'll find sometimes that they've kind of scooped out areas of the potato. There, I've got a picture there of how the voles have scooped out a section of the beets. And carrots, they'll eat carrots also. And you sometimes don't always see these until you're ready to go harvest them, and then you find out you've had vole activity. And so what are we going to do with voles? How can we control voles? Well, in the lawns, one thing it does help is to do that final mowing. Make sure you get the final mowing down to the 2-inch level. That's best for the lawn we've mentioned this before, but two, it's better for the lawn for diminishing snow mold and different things. But if you reduce the height to about 2 inches, it gives less habitat for the voles, less cover, and there's less stuff for them to eat. So reducing the mowing height is a good way to control them in the lawn. And also, voles are kind of tricky. Okay, they're around in the summer and early fall. They're there somewhere. They're usually kind of in the perimeters. Maybe if you have a deck or a little shed, they're sometimes hiding under that. And because you rarely see them in the summertime out like in the lawn. Once in a while I have, but you don't see them out there so actively working. So in the fall of the year, they're still kind of in the perimeters, and those are the areas to target. After we get a good snow cover, then they move under that cover of snow. See, I suppose they're lurking in the outskirts because owls and hawks will prey on them. So I suppose they're hiding until they get some snow cover. That's interesting, though. I have in the winter, before the snow gets too deep, I've sometimes seen a big area of activity in the snow, and even some wing imprints where an owl or a hawk has obviously sensed a vole under there. And so I've seen the activity. So, but anyway, in the fall of the year, we can do some things to try to diminish the chances of these voles. So a person can use rodent traps around kind of the perimeter, maybe under decks, by sheds. They seem to like to run along the foundation, so maybe along the foundation of your house. And of course, anytime we put traps and also any poisons, rodent poisons will work too, it's important to be aware of whether there's any children or pets in the area. And if so, locate the traps or poison inside a jar, or I like to put poison baits inside a section of PVC pipe. I found that voles enjoy kind of going into little tunnels. And I suppose they're safe in there. And if you put the poison bait in that tunnel, then they'll go in there as well. And then it also keeps it keeps it safe from children or
it's out of reach
getting into it. Yeah, exactly. For baiting any traps, mouse type traps, peanut butter works wonderfully for them. And also, I've had some people that have trapped as many as 30. I've gotten quite a number of emails over the years. People commonly trap 30 or so of these little creatures. And so other options would be around trees and shrubs to protect them, especially around valuable fruit trees or other especially young trees that have tender bark, circling them with hardware cloth. Chicken wire might not be quite close enough mesh.
Too big opening.
Exactly. But the hardware cloth that has the small metal mesh, the small openings, that's ideal for keeping the voles out. And maybe just tuck it down in maybe an inch below the surface just so that they can't work under it a bit. So very important around, around trees and shrubs. Hardware cloth is ideal. Now, in the vegetable garden, I've found that if in previous years I've had vole activity in potatoes, beets, carrots, I've found that the baits do work quite well. So at either end of a row of carrots or beets or potatoes, I will put the rodent baits again in my PVC pipes. Mm-hmm. And I find that attracts and kills them. There is one type of a bait that I've especially become fond of. And they're generically called place packs. Place packs. What that is, and I buy them at farm supply stores. They come in a little bucket, and a bucket has 20 or so of these packages. And these place packs, you don't open them up. They have the bait inside the little packet. You don't open them up. You just place these packets wherever you want. I use them inside the garage. I put them under our porches, along foundations. And then sometimes I will put them at the base of young trees. And those place packs are moisture resistant. So the snow and water, rain doesn't affect them, and they stay intact until the voles eat into them. And so they're quite effective that way. And again, you can put those packages inside a section of PVC pipe or a jar for safety. So in the vegetable garden, I'll use those place packs also. And it's interesting. When I've put those down in the fall, and then snow comes, and then in the spring, when everything melts, I found those place packs eaten into, and I found the dead voles. So I've come, again, safety is a key issue on making sure that nothing that shouldn't get into these. So I found those place packs at the farm supply stores to be very useful and easier than just loose baits of some sort.
We should say, too, that if you are using a poison of any kind, especially outdoors, to keep an eye, once you see it's maybe been consumed, keep an eye because you'll want to remove the dead animals because you don't want other animals eating them and then getting some of that poison into their system.
Absolutely, definitely. And always follow any cautions on the packages also of the baits. Another thing is, what about vole repellents? I have seen vole repellents at some garden centers, and repellents don't always work in all situations. Now, I use cold frames in the spring of the year to grow some of our bedding plants. A cold frame is a little unheated greenhouse right over the soil surface, only maybe a foot high or so, with kind of window-like sashes that I raise up, and they let sunlight in, etc. Well, one year I had problems with voles getting into those and wanting to eat my petunias, and so I wasn't happy. And I thought, a vole repellent might be ideal for in there. So I used a vole repellent. Many of them have a castor oil base. And sometimes when you look up vole repellents or control, you'll see from different, including university recommendations, to try castor oil repellents. Okay, so in this closed area, I put a whole bunch of this repellent. Well, the next day I opened up the area and, well, I actually caught voles in the act. So not only did it seemed like the repellents
Maybe it
didn't
attracted
phase. Yeah, maybe they had a taste for castor oil. And so in my case, it didn't work. But again, repellents are always worth a try. Maybe it'll work in some situations for some people too. And so, have you encountered voles in your area? I know some parts of town are affected more. We are a bit on the outskirts of town, but I know I have seen them, vole problems, even in inner areas, but you haven't really been bothered with voles.
No, one thing I was wondering too is that is there a lot of times because we're talking about voles, which are maybe akin to mice, and if people are concerned about mice, one of the things is like, don't keep things like wood piles next to the house. Don't keep things that may be a habitat or a hiding spot too close to the house. Do voles really get into inside into the house?
No.
Okay.
Voles don't get, possibly in a detached garage. And I don't believe I've ever heard of anyone bothered by voles coming into the house, other than maybe in a detached garage. But they seem to want plant material outside, even though peanut butter does seem to be a good attractant. But, on the plus side of voles, they don't seem to want to come into our homes.
Yeah.
They like to stay outside. And so it's really interesting with the voles. Interesting little creatures.
All right. Maybe nice to look at, but maybe not something that we want to see up close too often. All right, let's take a quick little break. When we come back, more about some pest control for your garden over the winter.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
All right, we're back, and we're talking about how to winter-proof your yard from pests, from those kind of unwanted guests, so that they don't undo all of the good work that you've been doing this summer, and now hopefully your winter will have a time to rest. We want to make sure it's got a good rest and not being interrupted by pests. So let's talk about rabbits. Rabbits are probably the one that not everyone, more people really struggle with. Rabbits can be they could be a real bugger.
That's one of the top 3 garden questions that I get. Blossom end rot on tomatoes, why autumn blaze maple doesn't thrive in heavy clay soil, and number 3 is rabbits. Now, did you grow up watching Bugs Bunny?
Oh, yeah.
And Elmer Fudd?
Elmer Fudd.
Poor Elmer Fudd. I oftentimes say, nowadays an elderly gentleman running through neighborhoods with a shotgun isn't allowed.
Right.
And of course, it's interesting. Sometimes I'm asked from people out of frustration, are we allowed to shoot rabbits? And so I've checked with at least the Fargo and Moorhead police departments. I'm sure many municipalities are similar. And no, you're not allowed to discharge even against rabbits. Not allowed to discharge those in town against rabbits. And also BB guns and air rifles, likewise. Not allowed even with rabbit frustration. Those are not allowed. If you are in a smaller town, you certainly could check with your municipality, but I believe in most cases that is just not the way. So Elmer Fudd needs to find a different. So we're going to try to find an alternative that Elmer can work with here. And now it's interesting. Rabbits in town. Rabbits, boy, they've got it made.
Yeah.
They've got shelter. They've got food. They become so tame. There aren't as many predators in town, and so rabbits have really found their happy spot by living amongst what we are wanting to grow also, and so it's interesting. So let's talk about how to control these. I often say it would be easier for people to control, and we'd have less sympathy for rabbits if they weren't so cute.
Right.
If they were kind of slithery and slimy, and, we'd have probably less problems, but they're so darn cute. Okay, so what are we going to do? Okay, anytime that cities can encourage predators, that would be awesome. Did I ever tell you, John, about a couple of years ago, I looked out our back window. It was a sunny day in January, and back by our garden fence, I saw a somewhat large furry thing sitting out there, just kind of sitting on the snow in the sun. It was a cold day. Kind of looked like a dog, grayish, brownish dog. Got out the binoculars. I captured it even on phone, the camera. And so I took a closer look. It was a coyote.
Oh, yeah.
And right down at the base of the coyote, it was kind of curled up. At the base of it was a dead rabbit. And that year, I had no rabbit problems. But then eventually, coyotes they're really sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
Once in a while, out of the corner of our eyes, we would see movement, like in the trees. And but this was the only time that I actually saw it and captured it on camera. So anyway, yes, I loved having that coyote around. I know in town maybe that's not appropriate, but it was there and it was controlling our rabbits. So hawks, owls,
Mm-hmm.
other predators, foxes, they can help keep that population down. Reducing the habitat can help. Like you mentioned, the pile of logs. Voles love getting down in between the pile of firewood logs. They love that. And rabbits can form places like that. That's good nesting places for rabbits to have another litter. And they love to hide under decks and porches. So one way to reduce the habitat too would be to fence off under a deck area to kind of reduce where they can hide. And fencing is probably the surest way to keep rabbits out. Now, I mentioned on our own garden fence, I need to do a little extra reinforcing because rabbits, if there's a little gap they can find their way in, they must have good memory and they can remember where to get in to my garden. And so sometimes a person needs to make sure that fencing is intact, maybe buried down in. Sometimes they indicate up to 2 inches. Down in and make sure that it is secure. It's interesting. Someone sent me an email once and indicated that a rabbit made it through their chain link fence. A chain link fence. Well, how did it get through a chain link fence? No, I said, well, did the chain link, can it kind of move? Move up, or the links move apart? And they said, no, it's solid. And I did a little investigating, and it's true. A full-grown rabbit can get through a chain link fence. Apparently, the limiting factor is the size of their skull, the skeleton skull. If that can fit through an opening, the rest of the body will kind of smooch down and to be able to get through. I saw it with my own eyes in our own garden, which is not a chain link fence, but it's got fairly, relatively small openings that a rabbit can't just walk through.
Mm-hmm.
And so a rabbit had gotten into our vegetable garden. I thought, I've got it. Okay, I'm going to corner this rabbit. Okay, so I started chasing it. And I got it. And when it got up to the fence, it didn't even pause.
Yeah.
It went right through. It was amazing. I wish I would have had it on video. It didn't even pause to see if its head would fit through. There it was. And I was just, well, I admired the rabbit then for what it could do. So it's anyway. Okay, that's a long-winded version of why we need to have small openings and make sure your fence is. And I know a lot of gardeners, perennials and things. Rabbits love different types of perennials, so sometimes gardeners will fence certain things. Rabbits love lilies, true lilies. And so I know some gardeners will fence individual things. And so fencing is probably the number one. Well, what about repellents? We would all like to be able to sprinkle something over the area and just keep the rabbits out. It's interesting when you look on social media, some people will indicate mothballs have worked. During the summer, walking barefoot around the area, keep them out. Irish Spring soap, that's mentioned frequently. One very good gardener, and I don't doubt that it worked for her, said dryer sheets. Okay. And she indicated they needed to be, I've got to remember the brand name. It was a specific dryer sheet, not just any dryer sheet. The name is going to escape me probably on what brand it was. Well, anyway, I bought that brand of dryer sheets, tied them all around our rose bushes in the fall. And, I think the rabbits might have used those dryer sheets to take home and dry their clothes.
Right. Probably rolled on them, got even fluffier.
Exactly. And it did nothing to help. But again, she was a good gardener. I don't doubt that in her situation it worked. So all of these home remedies can work for some people in some locations, but they don't enjoy a widespread enough success rate to recommend them. But there are at least 3 repellents that have some science behind them, and they have a wide enough track record of success to be able to recommend. And now repellents for rabbits work in 2 ways. They either make the stuff taste bad, so those are applied directly onto plants, or they make the whole scent smell bad, so rabbits don't like them. So those are the ways in which these repellents work. We get liquid fence. And now when you look at the ingredients of these repellents, they usually have animal products. See, rabbits and deer, as we're going to talk a little bit later in the program, rabbits and deer are plant eaters. They don't like to eat meat. And so anything that smells like an animal product or meat product, animal product, they don't like. So a lot of the active ingredients in these best repellents have animal type products. For example, liquid fence, when you look at it, it has putrefied egg, casein, which is milk, a milk product. And then usually they throw in a little garlic, maybe pepper for good measure. So again, you're coating it with an animal type product that rabbits and deer don't like either. So liquid fence. Another one that the soil conservation districts often use in their shelter belt plantings. And rabbits or deer can go through a shelter belt planting and nibble off those tiny little trees, ruin them in short order. So the Soil Conservation District is serious about controlling. They use a product called Plant Skid. One word, Plant Skid, PLANTSKYDD, Plant Skid. You can find that at garden centers. That is a blood-based product. So again, it smells or has a taste of an animal blood, and so that turns off deer and rabbits. Another one that has some good science behind it for rabbits is Repellex. Repellex is a systemic, meaning it's taken up by the plant, and when the plant that's not be used on food products, but for example, hosta. Deer and rabbits love hosta. And so when used on hosta, Repellex flavors the hosta leaves with an off flavor that rabbits do not like, and also deer. So Repellex has a good track record too. I might mention for rabbits, blood meal. The dried blood, you can buy that at garden centers. That sprinkled around works quite well. Also, as long as we're talking about the repellents, there is a homemade recipe that you can find for liquid fence. It's called kind of a liquid fence homemade recipe. Okay. So you can Google that. Also, University of Minnesota has had pretty good success for rabbits, and we'll talk about with deer, on this homemade recipe. So it's quite easy. In a 5-gallon bucket to give enough kind of area to mix this all up. Okay, you break a dozen eggs. Hopefully the price of eggs isn't higher than what you could buy liquid fence for. So, do a little cost comparison. So a dozen eggs, minus the shells, into a gallon jug. Add 2 cups of milk. Shake it up really, really well, and place in a warm, sunny spot. So that's going to make the eggs and the milk kind of smell not so good. That sounds like a human
repellent too.
Yes, exactly. And so let that set for a week or so, and then empty it into your 5-gallon bucket, and then add a little garlic powder, a little cayenne pepper for good measure, and then add about a half a cup of dishwashing soap to that. And then add enough water to bring it up to 5 gallons. And then that gives you 5 gallons of a material you could spray it on. Now, with egg and stuff in it, I found it can clog a sprayer. So I just use a watering can and water that onto the products you want to protect. Now, because it's got rotten eggs and milk in, it's not to be used on vegetable garden, but on ornamental type products. Then you can use that. And so rabbits, traps, I do a fair amount of live trapping. If you live trap, make sure that wherever you release this, make sure that property owner wants more rabbits.
Right.
So don't indiscriminately just drop them off somewhere. We've dropped them off at nature conservancy parks, places that are public. And gadgets, pie pans, water-filled jars, fake owls. If you use fake owls and fake snakes, they need to be moved regularly. Otherwise, the rabbits get used to them quite easily. Now, rabbit-proof plants.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get emails that, are there some plants that just rabbits won't attack? And so it's interesting when a person looks up rabbit-resistant plants or deer-resistant plants. I rarely publish lists of them. And here's why. On almost all of the lists that I've looked at, when I see a list of animal-resistant plants, I say, but hey, they ate that in my yard. And so if rabbits and deer are hungry enough, they'll go after almost anything. Yeah. Especially, just think of it in the wintertime. Boy, when there isn't any green grass or green vegetation, then they'll nibble twigs. And so some of the resistant shrubs that I've seen indicated, but the rabbits and deer ate that in my yard. So again, if they're hungry enough, so I hesitate to publish any lists of things that that are resistant to that. Now, I did do a little extra checking here to see if there was anything new, and from Rutgers University, they published a bulletin on landscape plants rated by deer resistance. Okay, we'll talk more about deer in a little bit, but this same applies to rabbits. These similar types of things seem to be preferred by rabbits and deer. Okay, what I like about Rutgers Bulletin, Landscape Plants Rated by Deer Resistance, is it's very clear in saying that these animals they'll go after anything. But what they rate them is by rarely damaged, seldom damaged, occasionally damaged, and less damaged. And so, again, they're very careful to say they're never damaged. So these aren't rabbit-proof plants, but, they kind of rate them as the level of damage or the level of preference that they might have. So you might do a little checking. Rutgers Landscape Plants Rated by Deer Resistant. But again, if you simply look up deer-resistant or rabbit-resistant plants, you've got to take that with a grain of salt. Because. Well, let's talk about some of the plants that rabbits love the most. Okay. They love the true lilies that we mentioned. They'll single those out from a mile away. And roses, they love roses, especially in the wintertime. They'll do two types of damage. They will just chew the bark all off, girdling them, or they'll start at the top and work their way down. If snow allows them to access the tips of roses, similar with apple trees, if snowdrifts allow them to access, they'll just get up there as high as they can. They'll start their chewing, oftentimes eating the whole twig, and then as the snow melts, they'll just work their way on down. And you'll find out that in the spring, gosh, you don't need to prune your roses because they only left 6 inches above ground level. Or they'll just, if they eat far enough down, they can certainly kill them. Also, arborvitae.
Yep.
Evergreen arborvitae. Just think of everything covered with snow and no other green vegetation, and there a rabbit or deer spots your arborvitae, whether it's a pyramidal type or the globe type. And now arborvitae are the evergreens with a flat type foliage, quite soft, and the rabbits will nibble those. Sometimes they'll hide inside a globe arborvitae and do all their nibbling in there. And when the green part of an arborvitae branch is eaten all the way in, that old wood on the center usually will not regenerate new growth. So if you look at older arborvitaes that have not been protected, you'll oftentimes see the bottom is all bare where rabbits have been able to reach. Bottom is all devoid. And of course, that kind of ruins the look of them. So I've got some very nice arborvitae that are about 6 years old. Some nice pyramidal ones and globes. So each fall, I circle them with chicken wire. And with a small enough mesh that the rabbits, even little rabbits, won't be able to get through. So the smallest diameter chicken wire. And so each fall, one of my tasks is to circle those with chicken wire. And as long as I don't want to risk rabbits getting them, that's what I'll do. And also, what if the snow gets deep? My chicken wire, I believe, is 3 feet, but you can snow drifts higher than that. So I watch carefully, and if the snow gets up to close to the chicken wire, then I do a little shoveling or snow blowing to get that level down. And it's interesting with the fencing. Of course, when there's snow, you can see the rabbit tracks or the materials rabbits leave behind. You can see, so you can kind of monitor where the rabbits are. So I mentioned hosta, arborvitae, winged euonymus burning bush.
Yep,
that is candy to a rabbit. They'll go for spireas. They'll really attack almost anything. And in the spring and summer, they love, of course, anything in the vegetable garden, almost anything, string beans, carrots. They'll go nibble those right down to little nubbins. And cabbage. So really, there isn't a great deal that they won't go for. And now it's very important this time of year in the fall to start thinking ahead for rabbits in the wintertime. Because as I mentioned, when there's not much greenery, they can't be out nibbling the clover in my lawn. So then they move into usually the shrub type plantings or trees. So I actually enjoy it when we get some snow cover, because then I can see where the rabbit activity is. I can see all their little footprints, and oftentimes they'll follow the same little pattern. And so I can see where are they going? Are they going after something that I don't have protected? So I do keep some chicken wire on hand. And if I see them going after something that I've not protected, then I'll put a circle of chicken wire around it. So this time of year, I'm on the lookout. I protect the things that I know are going to be problematic, but I also look to see where their recent activity is, especially as we get some snow that makes excellent tracking for them. And John, I'm sure you, probably like everybody else in our communities, I'm sure you have your share of rabbits and rabbits experiences.
We've got a burning bush that they've done a number on. A couple of other plants in the back was a sand cherry.
Sure.
And they seem to really like some of our red, the things that they like the same colors that I do, apparently. They like the red things. They really kind of go after that. So this year I've got to get out. That's one of the things I want to do this weekend is go out and put up some fencing around those just to make sure. Also hydrangeas, just to kind of protect those, just to make sure that they don't get to those. We haven't really had a whole lot of damage there. Boy, they really did a number on dogwood a couple years ago. But that dogwood, bless it, just bounces right back.
Bounce back again. Yep. And I mentioned live trapping. I found apples. They like apples. It seemed Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny. It was always carrots, probably, or maybe cabbage. But I found that that apples they really like too. So anyway, as I always say, we're all in this together. And it is nice to be able to protect a person's material from these things. And of course, the rabbits got to live too. They're part of an important life cycle too. But when their populations become so out of whack with lack of predators and natural enemies, then that's when we all start having problems as well. Our garden, as I was growing up, out between Alice and Fingal, out on the farm, we did not have rabbit issues. We had deer, and we had raccoons, but rabbits were one thing that out on the farm we did not have the way we do in town.
All right, let's take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk about deer.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back this week and we're talking about pest control in the winter, how to keep animals from undoing all the good that you've done this summer. We've talked about voles, we've talked about rabbits. Let's talk about the biggest problem, maybe not the biggest problem for most people, but the physically biggest the biggest, deer. Deer. We talked about voles are cute, rabbits are cute, deer are cute. We get excited when they see them walking down the street maybe, but when they get in our yard and they start eating our greenery, our bushes and our plants and trees.
They're a fun animal to watch.
Right.
Fascinating, except when they're out munching on our stuff.
Right.
And I've actually, in our yard in South Fargo, I have had deer that have come on up. Sometimes they'll come in through the drainage ditches and kind of little areas, kind of even going into town. And so we have had, and of course, that's why I put up a fence, not just a rabbit fence, but a fence even to keep deer out. Have you ever had deer over in your area?
We do. We see them from time to time. We're close enough to the river where I think they will come up, and there's a lot of green space around there too. And by Concordia College, sometimes we'll even see them on campus.
Urban deer are tame.
Yeah.
I think you could walk up and swat them on the back end. They're oftentimes that tame.
Yeah.
And so the human scent doesn't seem to bother them. They're well used to that. And of course, again, when we talk about plants that animals don't like, what if we just plant things that deer don't like? Deer-resistant plants. Well, anytime that I've examined a list, like we mentioned kind of with rabbits, I've seen plants on that list that they have gone for in our own yard. For example, sometimes a person sees that things such as geraniums, marigolds, plant those and it'll keep the deer out. Well, deer and rabbits have both eaten my marigolds and geraniums. Not only haven't they repelled them, but they've actually given them a nice meal. Also, like blue salvia, which is quite aromatic, and lilacs are supposedly deer resistant, but they've eaten our lilacs in the past. So anytime any of those deer-proof plants, you have to take that with a grain of salt. If they're hungry enough, they're going to eat almost anything. And of course, deer do love apple trees. Gosh, they'll nibble the twigs off apple trees and they can reach up. Another way that bucks will damage apple trees or almost any young tree is rubbing the horns against that. I get emails every year, photos of where the bucks have rubbed off, maybe an inch or two diameter, a nice little tree, and they've used that as a rubbing post. And of course, in short order, that can totally kill a tree. Yeah. Rub off all of the bark and the underlying cambium layer, and there you go. So they love arborvitae the same way rabbits do. So deer can, oftentimes at deer browsing height, there'll be a big dent in pyramidal arborvitae where you can see that, oh gosh, halfway up, gosh, the deer ate all that and it didn't regenerate. They love daylilies, hosta, garden lilies, euonymus, hydrangea, impatiens. So there's a long list. Okay, so what do we do about deer? Okay, fencing. Now, my fence is 6 feet high. Deer can scale that, but at least it keeps them just from gently wandering into my garden, and they'd have to work at that a little. So fencing does work. At our old place before we moved, it was kind of on the outskirts, and there was a kind of a shelter belt row, and I heard someone say that fish line worked.
Oh.
So, for example, on a row of kind of a shelter belt trees, if you put fish line at about chest height or about the height that if a deer came up to it, they would rub kind of the front, kind of their breast area about to that. And deer are cautious. And if they, at night, if they see this little glint of something there or they feel that, it's enough to make them cautious enough and not want to enter that area. And so I found that fish line did work.
Okay.
And I had just seen that when I investigated, how do you keep deer out of your yard? Because we used to be bothered with it much more than we are now. And so I tried that fish line, and it does work. One problem is if the fish line, I used to just put the fish line kind of along the outer part of the tree row and kind of wrapped it from one area to another. The problem is if it ever does become disengaged and fall down, then it's getting caught in lawnmowers and different things like that. But I found that fish line was effective, in the proper spots. So I think there was something to it. And again, the hit and miss repellents that you mentioned, some people indicate in rural areas, maybe human hair, but in town, the human scent does not seem to deter them at all. Pepper, dried blood probably has some merit to it. The repellents we mentioned, plant skid, the Repellix, and also liquid fence. Those three have some merit. Also, there's an interesting fertilizer product called Milorganite. It's a bagged product that you can find at garden centers, farm supply stores, national chains. Have you ever used or seen the product Milorganite?
I don't think I have, no.
Yeah, Milorganite, it's got an interesting history. Milorganite, MIL, comes from the city Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is actually a product made from the sewage plants. And I mean, it's not an icky type product.
Right.
It's bagged. When you open it up, it looks like a compost type product. It has a good fertilizer. It's kind of a good natural type fertilizer. But anyway, it has a decent track record of repelling deer and rabbits. So Milorganite can be used on lawns. The advantage of using it kind of on your lawn to fertilize, then it is kind of making your property less attractive that these animals even want to be on. And it's not something that, if you sniff the bag, it'll have kind of a composty type aroma, but it's not something that once you spread it on your lawn, you're going to be repelled. It works well on animals. So try Milorganite. I've tried it with quite good success. And so try that. The homemade repellent that we mentioned, University of Minnesota has kind of a similar, and again, that was breaking the dozen eggs, minus the shells, into a gallon jug, add 2 cups of milk, shake, let it sit for about 7 days in a good warm spot, empty it in a 5-gallon jug, add a little garlic, cayenne pepper, half a cup of dishwashing soap, then water enough to make 5 gallons, and then apply that to the products you want. Now, that should not be used in vegetable gardens, but sometimes if you want to keep deer out of an area, such as out of a vegetable garden, you could apply it on the perimeter. Even though these repellents aren't to be used on edible material, but you can put it around, create a perimeter, even around your yard, the outer I've done this sometimes too around the outer perimeter of a yard to see if you'll just keep them out totally from coming into your yard. So I think that has some merit too, to try some of these repellent type products, creating a perimeter that they might not want to enter.
Yeah, so lots of things there, lots of ways that things to keep an eye on, and also things that we can use to try to keep these, as cute as they are, keep these pets from doing damage to our yard.
Yep, and one of the times that these rabbits and deer are most damaging is during the winter. And that's why I thought a discussion now, when we can do some protection in the fall and then keep our eyes open with the approaching winter to try to prevent these, especially rabbits, which are even more common than deer, to keep those and, of course, the voles out of our yards.
All right. Well, if people have questions about pest control, if they want to follow up with you, or if they want to send in pictures of their successes, like these great shots of the amaryllis bulbs blooming in the summer garden, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu. And also, if you have the definitive secret for keeping rabbits, deer, and voles away, I'd love to hear it.
All right.
Or share your successes, or trials and errors that you've had with them as well.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Don. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening.